Thank you for coming, everyone. So last time I presented at Affiliate Summit in Vegas a few years ago, I had 5 people in the biggest room I've been in my life. I had to tell them to all sit together, so it's good to have a few more than 5 people here this time, which is a good start. So so for those who don't know me, I am James Little, based in London, as you may tell from the accent, and I'm the Group Commercial Director at a company called TopCashback. I've been working in affiliates for quite a while, since 2003, been involved in the UK and started to get a lot more involved in the US since we launched our site over here. I run a blogger and a podcast, and it's my 3rd time speaking at Affiliate Summit because someone else pulled out, so I managed to fill in the gap. So I'm not sure if that's a good thing or not, but we'll see later on. So kind of what I've come to talk about today is about the fact that kind of TopCashback, who I work for and have for a while, have gone from being a fairly decent sized affiliate in the UK to launching kind of a global presence. So we've launched around the world, in the US, in China, in India, and lots of other places. And I thought what I could hopefully do is kind of share our experience, some of the hurdles we've come across, some of the challenges that we've seen, some of the opportunities we've seen, and see if that gives anyone in the room kind of some insight into what you potentially do internationally. So just before I start, it'd be useful just to understand with maybe a kind of show of hands who's in a room. So who have we got from like an advertiser here, if you put your hands up? Cool. There's a couple of advertisers. Publishers? No publishers, no secrets being, or one publisher, no, not too many secrets being given away. Networks? Agencies? Anyone else just wants to put their hand up? Great. So just a bit of background about TopCashback and our UK business. So we are the biggest publisher in the UK in terms of working with traditional affiliate networks. So we have just over 6 million members, listed about 4,500 advertisers. We'll generate £1 billion worth of sales this year, even with the Brexit. And we serve back kind of 50 million page impressions and seeing some good kind of growth. So I joined the company just over 5 years ago when we had kind of about 750,000 members, I think. So developed quite a lot in the past 5 years, and as I said, kind of launched internationally as well. Outside of the UK, we launched in the US just under 5 years ago. We've launched in India, we do some work in Norway now, and China as well. Ireland we just started, so a fair few amount, and we've got kind of 8.5 million members globally now, so kind of fairly decent size, and as I said, some good challenges that's brought along the way. So I guess where we started international for us was kind of a bit of an experiment. We've been running the UK. I think internally we were thinking, do we go internationally? Like, what opportunities it do? But also, we were getting to the point where we, at the second time, we're kind of about 18 months behind our biggest competitor, who have now overtaken. And what we didn't want to do is take the focus too much off our kind of core UK business. So I say kind of as an experiment because we were perfectly happy to say, if this doesn't work, we'll just not do it. We didn't throw loads of resource in it, and hopefully we can show that without having to build big teams, you can actually launch and build a decent sized kind of international business. So when we were looking kind of at countries that we can go into, the first one that we actually launched in was India, which may not be everyone's first choice. There were some reasons why we chose India. Number one is the population is huge. So 1.25 billion in 2013. There's not as many in the UK, even the size we are. And the e-commerce market was growing massively as well. It had an established affiliate market. I mean, we're a cashback site. If there's no affiliate networks, we can't really operate in a territory. So that's one of our biggest things that we need to look at. So it had a young but established affiliate market of a bunch of affiliate networks and quite a lot of retailers. The broadband penetration in India, especially over the past couple of years, has been massively increasing as well. So 30% of the population now has broadband in India. That's more people than the population of the United States, just to kind of put that into context. So yeah, a really kind of good market to launch in. There was a few cashback sites out there already, but they were all relatively new as well. So we saw it as a market we can go in and hopefully start to steal some share. And probably the main thing as well is we didn't need to think about translation. So if we'd done the easy thing and maybe gone into like another part of Europe, bearing in mind we were in Europe, we could have gone into France or Germany or places like that. We would have had to have thought about kind of translation, and for the experiment that I was talking about, like that would have been probably quite a difficult task and would have had to bring loads more people in, etc. So India was the first one that we did. It's gone okay. It launched in 2011. I think the biggest thing that did for us is it built the framework for us to launch in other territories. So we went into India not thinking this is going to be a massive part of our business. Went to India thinking, this has a long-term huge potential. But actually, kind of in the short term, what it gives us is, we have to think about new currencies and different accounts, and we have to completely change our tech system that had just been built for one country essentially. There were some challenges. Opening a bank account was the first challenge probably came across. So we went out there and people were saying, it's going to take 6 months for you to open a bank account as a business, unless you want to give us a bribe, and then it would be done in about 2 weeks, which we didn't do and didn't really want to do, and managed to get the account open. But that's the kind of thing you deal with when you go into other countries, which I find really astonishing. It was also a very different market. We've now got an office out there. That's brought its own challenge. We had to let someone go recently because he was, I think, 16th in the queue for a shower in the mornings and was kind of late into work every single day. But which feels awful, and that wasn't the only reason. But that's the kind of thing you're dealing with. It's just a completely different market and a completely different culture. So where we went in there, the UK culture, we very quickly had to kind of adapt to that. And that's why we've opened an office out there and got kind of eventually brought kind of people into the UK that knew that market and understood it as well. The networks out there have caused a challenge in themselves. So we're used to kind of the CJs and the link shares and the affiliate windows of the world. And whilst there's some established networks, they tend to kind of favour their merchants more. So we, for example, run one program, probably our biggest program in India, and we were sending loads of sales through to it, and then probably 60% of the sales got declined. And we said, well, why have these sales been declined? They said, the merchant couldn't find the sales in Google Analytics. I'm like, but as a network, you've tracked them. They're real sales. They're real customers. These are customers expecting their cash back. And it's like, but he can't find it in Google Analytics. So those are the kind of things that you have to kind of challenge with. So kind of as a market, whilst it's continuing to grow for us, and we feel it has loads of potential, like there's things like that came along the way that we just weren't used to in the UK market, and has caused problems for our users in terms of us getting potentially bad reviews off something that we had no control over. Spend levels and customers is really low as well, but yeah, I mean it was a good experience for us. It gave us that platform to launch in the US. So we launched in the US just coming up to it'll be 5 years in November, so hopefully we'll have a big birthday party around that. And again, the reason we picked the US was very different from the reasons we picked India. So India went kind of, there's low competition, it's a fairly new and developing market, whereas the US is kind of probably the polar opposite of that to a certain extent. There's obviously a big, massive e-commerce market, which opened up a lot of eyeballs for us. But and there's some established affiliate networks that's helped. We already worked with the likes of CJ, Awin, Rakuten, etc. in the UK, and that would no doubt help us in our USA launch. But there's lots of competition, right? So as a cashback site, the likes of Ebates is huge and still is a lot bigger than what we are in the US. It got sold for $1 billion recently, so they always have loads of money, which doesn't really help. So we had kind of loads of different competitors, but the thing that's unique about kind of what we were doing is our UK model was a 100% cashback model. So essentially that meant that everything that we receive in terms of commission, we pass back to the customer. We don't keep a single penny of the commission. So where you've got your likes of Ebates and Mr. Rebates, etc., they will take a percentage themselves. So they might pass half it back to the customer. We would pass a whole lot back. And surprisingly, there was just no one else doing that. If there had been other people doing that, we wouldn't have launched in the US. But no one else had that model. So we said, well, can we disrupt the market? And that's what we've been kind of trying to do. So kind of the initial approach with the US was kind of a Kevin Costner film, which you might recognize, Field of Dreams. But the initial approach was kind of build it and they will come. So like I mentioned, this was an experiment for us. This was like, we don't want to put loads of resource into launching a USA site. We don't want to take that resource away from the UK where we've got kind of a growing business. So we literally just had kind of a couple of techies building the site. It was very much a secret project. I think only about 5 people in the company knew about it at any one time. Because we were kind of very paranoid that our competitors might kind of follow suit and launch out there before we could. So we just literally put it live and didn't tell anyone about it. So that very much a kind of build it and they will come approach. But kind of when we turned on, because our model on 95% of the advertisers on the site, we already had the best cashback rate. So we were kind of hoping that the product that we built and the product we've been kind of building for kind of 11 years would be the main thing that would get people to come. I think I've read lots of kind of marketing books, and everyone seems to say that the build it and they will come approach never works. But in our case, that's what we were trying to do. So we didn't put huge marketing budgets into it. We concentrated on that product and offering. We had kind of 2 or 3 people for probably the first 18 months to 2 years. We literally had 2 or 3 people working on a site that was getting to the point where it had tens of thousands of members. But again, we were just so worried about kind of taking away from that kind of that big UK business that we didn't want to lose sight of that, I guess. So things that we did, the main thing we did was kind of a blogger outreach campaign. So we had a PR team or a PR person, because it wasn't a team, because there's only 2 or 3 people on it. We had a PR person that started to go out and do some traditional PR, some blogger outreach, looking at what some of the other sites were doing, what sites they were featuring on, kind of reaching out. We have kind of tell a friend schemes. So at the moment, you can earn $15 for kind of getting someone to sign up to TopCashback once they've obviously earned some money. So that's what a lot of our blogger sites were using. And we did everything from the UK. So we had partnerships in the UK, of one person to start with. We had, all our marketing over here. We had all our email teams over here. Everything was being done from there. And we had no idea what the US was like. Like, we'd have merchants and newsletters that we probably didn't know what they sold. We were kind of relying on the networks to give us some kind of insight into that. But I couldn't tell the difference between going to a Macy's in the US versus a Debenhams in the UK, which apparently is still quite different, and I still don't get it. But we've got a US team to handle that now. But yeah, so we were doing everything from the UK, but even then we were told that our response times, etc., was kind of as good as some of our competitors in the US. That led to us kind of later down the line, we realised that that build it and they will come approach wouldn't last forever. We'd kind of been going for a couple of years before we started to get a team out in New Jersey, so building an office out there, doing marketing and partnerships and everything else. So we now have kind of an office not too far from New York. But it was a real success. We're 5 years old, it's not been an easy ride. I think our biggest challenge was probably, our model that I said is really unique and 100%. No one really understood. Like customers, in the UK, we say 100% cashback because all the cashback sites are 100% cashback. But you say 100% cashback to users and they haven't got a clue what you're talking about. So we had to change some of our marketing messages again to kind of fit in with kind of the journey, I guess. And what even the advertisers, I went to a conference probably 2 years ago now. So bear in mind, we've been going for kind of 3 years. One of our biggest retailers on the site we're working with, and I met up with him and I was saying, so where we make our money is from paid placements. So I said to the guy, I'm like, okay, we'd like to get more paid placements with you. So, paying for a gold package might cost $1,000 because that's where we make all our money because we pass all the commission back on. It's like, yeah, but you make money from the commission. Why do you want paid placements as well? I'm like, well, no, you've been working with us for 3 years. We generate you millions of pounds worth of business. You do realise that we don't keep any of that, right? And he's like, you don't? And it was kind of like the penny dropped, and within that meeting, he then signed off loads of budget to get loads of paid placements done. And but that was a challenge we kind of came across, is that even people that have been working with for years in this industry, because it was such a unique kind of proposition in the US, no one really got that, even years after working with them. So that was kind of challenging. I think most people get that now. We also had the point that led to some abuse on our programs. We've had a few issues where you might have a CPL program saying we'll pay you $5 for someone that does a free trial or $10 for someone that does a trial. And then all of a sudden it goes on Reddit, for example, in a beer money forum, and you get tens of thousands of customers sign up to this product expecting their $10, and the merchant suddenly realizes, oh, I don't have money to pay for that. That doesn't help us when that happens, because we have to we deal with it, and we've ended up paying those customers ourselves a lot of times. That's the bit that's probably caused us the most money. But you do that because you don't want the bad reputation you might suffer off the back of it. So so our model uniquely still causes quite a few problems over here. But we're doing all right. We've been going for 5 years. We've got over 1 million members. We've already done over $1 billion worth of sales. We drive $2 million kind of dollars plus in cashback every month. And we're now, I think, the third biggest cashback site. So out of those established sites like Mr. Rebates and Befrugal and UPromise and various others, we're now bigger than all of them. The only people ahead of us are Shop at Home, where we're pretty close to catching up, and then Ebates, where we're not very close to catching up, but we think we'll get there. So kind of, I guess, hopefully that shows that from having a very small team and an experiment that we thought, this, may be a, something that we turn off in a couple of months' time or a year's time if it doesn't work, has actually turned into, just by doing that and having a unique product offering and doing something a bit different and trying to challenge that market, it's, led to us, becoming a fairly decent size affiliate and with a lot of potential to keep growing. But that's all fair and good. But the world is changing. So borders are opening up. Unless you're the UK because of the Brexit. But the borders are opening up, and people are shopping from all over the world now, and that kind of happened to us by accident. So our experience with cross-border shopping was that we just started suddenly seeing loads of sales coming from other countries. So this was mainly on a USA site. We hadn't really seen this on the UK. I mean, most of the stuff we'd seen on the UK that's come from China in the past had been fraud, which we'd actually kind of turned all of China off from even visiting our site in the UK at one point because of the fraud we were getting from there. So where we started to see this on the US, we're like, oh, we're a bit worried about this. Let's look into the sales, and we started seeing, no, you know what, these are real sales. Let's look at this. So we saw sales from kind of China, Russia, South Korea, Hong Kong, 50 other countries, all these sales coming from other places, and to a variety of different programs. So we started to kind of look into it, and actually we saw the biggest opportunity in the area we were getting the most sales outside of the US for was China. We knew nothing about China, so we started to research it, and we saw there's actually a big kind of a big market for cross-border shopping. So what did we do? So we looked at the market. As said, we saw that because incomes have been growing in China, off the back of that, e-commerce shopping has been growing. So in 2015, the cross-border e-shopping accounted for $40 billion. And over 6% of China's total e-commerce market. So a lot more than probably you've seen in any other markets. And the big part of that was probably luxury goods, and that's where we're seeing most of our sales coming from. So luxury goods, that might be apparel, so stuff like Ralph Lauren, for example, does a lot. Watches did huge amounts for the likes of Ashford selling. There's thousands of watches we were selling. And health and beauty as well. So again, we started to try and understand, what's causing that. Why is luxury shopping important to Chinese customers? So doing some research, we found authenticity was kind of a really big reason for that. I don't know if any of you have ever seen kind of the Apple stores that have been popping up in China. So in one of the towns, or one of the cities, in China, out of 30 Apple stores in the city, one of them is official, and 5 of them are kind of authorized resellers. But you look at that store there up on the screen, it looks like going into the Apple store. Like, the experience is exactly the same. The shirts they're wearing are the kind of blue Apple shirts. I was reading an article that actually said that where someone went into one of the first ones, these real ones that popped up, the people working there thought they worked for Apple. and they were selling, and most of them were selling real Apple products, right? There was lots of them selling fake Apple products and stolen and counterfeit, etc. as well. But most of them were real products. And actually what was happening is because there was such a demand for Apple products in China, and Apple hadn't really taken kind of part in that demand, all their pre-sales are sold out, etc. What was happening is Apple products were just being smuggled into the country, and they'd be sold up to 5 times their value, their retail price. And customers didn't want to do that, right? And then you go on to kind of some of the Alibaba sites, for example, the equivalent is kind of your eBays out there, and you're getting kind of bags that that are completely fake. So as kind of luxury shoppers and people that live out in China, they want the real thing. So that was obviously one of the reasons that we saw some demand. And then there's a kind of better quality as well. So there was a massive, in 2008, there was a big kind of baby milk scandal. I don't know if any of you remember it. It affected 300,000 babies, 60,000 of them were hospitalized. So, if they could afford it, the Chinese customers didn't want to buy baby milk from China because they were so worried it was going to hurt their children. And it wasn't just baby milk off the back of that scandal, things like protein powder, for example. So brands like GNC that we work with are huge in China because people just want to buy it for where they know the quality and the testing and everything else that is rigorously done in the US and other countries, places like Germany especially, is done as well. So we see that as a really big market and a really big reason for it. And then there's kind of the cost and kind of the product choice as well. So I mentioned earlier on about kind of the price of kind of the iPhone device, etc. But actually, what we found is that the cost to import products as an advertiser, say you've got beauty products, you're L'Oreal, and you want to import all your kind of makeup, etc. into China, you could pay up to 80% tax to import those products. So that leads to 2 things. Number one, they're not going to ship all their products out there, so there's less product choice. And number 2, you go into the equivalent of boots. I should probably know what that is in China. I don't. I apologise. And you'll pay a lot more for it. So again, but if they use their packaging fees, the tax might be a lot less, more like kind of 30% is what we've seen from some markets, and it can depend on what you're buying. But another big reason why actually it becomes a lot more affordable to them to actually buy from that. And actually, delivery isn't that much of an issue anymore. So previously, where as an advertiser, you might be thinking, we don't sell to China. Why would we target China as a country? Chinese customers don't need to get their product delivered from you as an advertiser. They'll use freight forwarding companies that are actually cheaper anyway. So it's a much better option. So as advertisers, you don't even need to think, I need to kind of send stuff out there. So there's lots of good reasons. So then kind of what do we do? So I think China is a real example for us where we just kind of completely fell into this market having no idea really what we were doing. So we saw these sales, so we thought, right, how do we kind of look at this? So we looked at where the traffic was coming from. So looking at kind of referral stats, for example, and seeing kind of where we were being talked about without our knowledge on Chinese forums talking about international shopping. Customers had seen that actually, we had the best cashback rates. So they were coming through to our USA site, they were signing up, and they were purchasing. So we started looking at that. So where we saw we were being talked about, we started to interact with them. So we employed one Chinese person to start with, and their kind of role in life at the start of that of employment was actually just saying, okay, I'm going to post on forums. A lot of this they did kind of not as TopCashback, they did as kind of a member and saying, hey, have you seen TopCashback? I mean, forum spam in a certain extent, but actually, it worked really well in terms of generating customers and interacting with that forum. And then because actually recommendations in China, for example, is really important as well. So actually a product recommendation is probably one of the highest referral rates and one of the reasons that people will buy an individual product. So we started understanding which of our customers were coming from China. So we said, well, okay, we can see they're coming to our .com site. None of our site is in Chinese. Doesn't need to be to a certain extent because they're buying from US sites. We started saying, well, okay, we know that they're coming from China, so let's just give it a test. Let's send them a Mandarin newsletter. So let's just pick out some retailers that we know either ship there or being purchased from our Chinese customers because we can see that happening. So let's send them a Mandarin newsletter and kind of see how it's received. So we did that. It went down quite well. It was a bit of work, but we got it out there. Understanding even things like spam filters. So spam filters in the US and the UK, there's certain words that you can't use. Your lotteries or guaranteed, I think, is one of the words that you shouldn't really use in your emails because it could get blacked by spam. Plus, we had to then think about a completely different kind of country and a completely different rules in relation to spam filters. So I had to learn about that as well. So we started doing that. We then said, well, okay, how do we take from doing a newsletter to say, let's turn that into a site? So we didn't want to go and build, we didn't even own the .cn. Someone else had purchased a .cn that we ended up having to buy it off kind of years later because, if you want to try and get your brand name in China, the trademark rules are pretty much non-existent. So if you don't own it already, then you probably have to buy it from someone because you might not be able to get it in court. So we started off by saying, okay, let's just start up a subdomain of TopCashback. So we launched cn.topcashback.com. We translated some pages to start with. Most of it was still in English, but we translated things like our help pages. Then we started to translate a few of our merchant pages where we knew we were having kind of the most sales from. Then we started translating our payout pages, and then we did kind of other pages to eventually the point where most of our pages were translated. We sent out more regular newsletters, like that continued. Started to understand which of our kind of retailers would accept payments, because a lot of, that's the other thing is actually saying, do you accept, Chinese credit card payments or international credit card payments? I started understanding that. Started to put kind of icons against individual retailers to understand kind of which ones even accepted Alipay or various other things. Started building that up. Worked with some freight forwarding companies to say, you don't need to, use a company that does ship. You can use these freight forwarding companies. Started partnerships with those. Built some social media accounts. Obviously, they don't use Facebook and Twitter and various other things. So we started to build up those accounts. And just, I guess, started to do it properly. Again, we'd had that experiment. We'd seen the results from it had been fairly positive. So we started to do it properly. So kind of where does that take us now? So last year in October 2015, we launched a fully responsive site. We don't even have a fully responsive site in the US or the UK. So we actually launched a completely new platform for the Chinese site that we'll eventually move our other countries onto. It features kind of USA, UK, other European retailers rather than just the US ones. So we've started building that up. Actually, 20% of our USA sales, so that 1 billion earlier on, 20% of that is now coming from China, just through kind of a little bit of work that we've done there. We are the only Chinese site that I know of cashback-wise that supports payouts and Alipay. That was a nightmare itself because to get an Alipay account, you have to have a Chinese bank account, but then to get money into China, you have to think about paying tax on top of it, and we're a 100% cashback site, so we're like, but if we have to pay tax on our money, then all of a sudden we can't be a 100% cashback site. I think we're actually doing it by sending Bitcoin to like someone and they're paying Alipay. I don't know how it works, but yeah, it wasn't the easiest setup. It's fair to say. So it's completely legal. Don't worry about that. But there is government regulations and stuff going on. So. And there's still issues. Like the thing with kind of emerging markets and cross-border shopping especially is it's changing all the time. So April this year, for example, the Chinese government changed their regulations on tax that you pay as a person buying an item and buying watches. So instead of paying 30%, like I mentioned earlier on, they've doubled it. So you have to pay 60% tax if you buy a watch internationally now. So the likes of Ashford, etc., have built big businesses around that. All of a sudden, their customers are having to pay a lot more. And the Chinese government's seeing that because actually their own luxury market is decreasing. So whilst the e-commerce and cross-border shopping is massively increasing, the luxury market in China decreased by 2% last year. So they're having to take that on board and create some changes around that. So there will be more of that, and there's that in every country. We do some work in Russia, for example, and as soon as the Russia and Ukraine kind of stuff was happening, the currency tanked and all the sales that we saw start building. We were going to launch a Russian site, etc. Just completely fell flat until that kind of started to resolve itself. So again, you see, the fact that wars can kind of, interact with kind of your businesses. It's a challenge, but I think it's one worth taking. So I guess in summary of all that, our experiment we think has been a success to the point where we're now going to do a lot more of it. So we're going to expand this year. So Russia is a country we're looking at. Japan, we've got kind of a blog and we're setting up other things. We're looking at how we expand that more into 2017, launching other territories. So I guess what I want to try and get across is saying if actually you're thinking about launching internationally, then you don't have to say I need a £10 million budget to go and do this. You can do it on a shoestring, which is essentially what we did. So don't be scared of that, but make sure you've got a product that stands out. Our success, we think, was based upon disrupting the market and continuing to disrupt that market. And so the build it and they will come will only work if you've got a decent site and a decent product. And then there will be changes around the way. So regulations will continue to change. Don't throw it all into one country. That's why we're expanding to other ones just in case. Look at and I think that the rewards are worth it. So it was only a short presentation. We only had half an hour. I think we're at the end of it. But thank you. And are there any questions, I guess? Cool.
I think you briefly touched on it. How do you make money?
How do we make money? So we make money through advertisements in our email newsletters on our site. So we give all the cash back away, and we'll say to someone, if you want to go in our newsletter, you have to pay maybe $600, for example. Or on our homepage, you have to pay this. So we have various packages. So they're not kind of third-party advertisements. They're all advertisements saying, we've got this really good cashback rate. You should buy from it now. So often when people are having sales or whatever else, in addition to paying for that, they'll give us a higher rate of cashback, which all goes back to the customer. So instead of offering, a good example is Expedia in the UK. So Expedia will often pay 8% on hotels. When they're running a promo with us and they're in our newsletter, they go up to 12%. So we're promoting that higher rate to our customers, so giving them something that's worth going newsletter and then charging Expedia to go in that newsletter because it will generate them hundreds of thousands of pounds extra in revenue.
From your company's experience, do they actually have affiliate networks or other third-party companies in China that will hold inventory for you?
Yeah, so China was very separate from it, or different from India. So in India, we had there was affiliate networks out there already. In China, there's kind of one or two. We haven't interacted with them yet. We've had some conversations. We haven't integrated them onto the site because for us, the Chinese market that we saw coming to our site was all cross-border shipping. And what we find in China generally is that the big sites, the Alibaba kind of sites, are generally the ones that are generating most of the revenue. And actually, they potentially don't necessarily need to work with cashback sites to an extent. So we are starting to. But actually, another thing that we kind of learned from our customers is if, for example, Levi's have a Chinese website, right? Customers, the cross-shopping customers, prefer to go to the US website to offer it because even it being a Levi's website in China, they still don't know it's legitimate, right? They still don't know they're going to be buying authentic clothing and authentic jeans. So they'd prefer to go through to a US site. So even like what we found actually when we've talked to some as well, is that the actual having language and converting it into Chinese when you're a retailer can actually be a bad thing to an extent, because they'll then wonder, oh, is this a real product? You know, and it's a very weird challenge to have. But yeah, that's one of the things we found. So no, we don't work with many Chinese networks. There are one or two. Chinese EAN, I think, is one of them, and probably the biggest one. But we think that's a market that will massively grow in the next few years. Cool. And I think that's done. Sorry?
What was the name?
Chinese EN, I think, is the name. If you grab me afterwards, I can get you the details anyway. But cool. I think that's time up. So thank you for coming along. There's more than 5 people, and I hope you appreciate it. Thank you.